So how's it going, man? Let's just start.
Yeah.
And this is kind of like the inaugural episode. We'll see how this goes of the world's strongest opinion, because we've all got opinions, and you know what opinions are like, right? They're like assholes. Everybody's got one, and they're real shitty. And
Yeah.
ours are probably no exception. Uh, although we like to think that they are objectively correct.
Yeah.
um, So yeah, we're gonna see where this goes. I mean, there's I've actually been competing now for over 14 years in strongman. Uh, been uh, been some places, seen some shit, and done some shit. And of course, over time I've developed some very strong opinions on various things. It's not intended to throw anybody under the bus. Like, I'm never gonna point my finger or call anybody out in particular. Anything that I ever talk about when we get into this is just from my years of experience. Things that maybe I wish were different. But I think it all comes with a caveat and understanding. I think it's important that, no matter what direction these conversations go, that, at the end of the day, there's really not a lot of money in strongman. That's not just for athletes, that's for promoters also. Promoters by and large volunteer their time with very limited resources, sometimes with very high expectations. So at the end of the day, my intentions aren't to bust anybody's balls in particular, but we have opinions, and we want to talk about them, and hopefully in the end it leads to constructive conversation.
Yeah. I think that's the important part, is really just trying to help move the sport forward. Because I think talking to you has been eye-opening, because sometimes I've only ever competed like as a novice and at the local level, but I've helped volunteer at a lot of shows, including like the USS Pro International, which that could be a whole discussion in and of itself, as the new pro shows that are everywhere and stuff. But I think like trying to help grow the sport is important. Like earlier in the week, talking about like the world records and everything, of like the importance of trying to keep things moving forward. Because I think in people's minds, I know at least volunteering at shows, people have these really high expectations, almost like this is our full-time job. And it's like, for most of us, we've worked our 40 hours, we've trained our 7 hours or whatever or more a week, and now we're doing this as an extra thing to help make it happen. And I think it's important to keep growing the sport, but also adding legitimacy, especially now that there are more eyes on the sport and everything. I think I know you talked about wanting to talk about like the world records and how that's handled these days, but also there are so many things of like the fact of, like you said, we've talked about it before, the fact that novice is usually the largest category in any local show, which makes things hard for like a lot of the open guys to really test themselves before they get to nationals.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. Obviously, I've got opinions on all that. Big surprise. Yeah. I mean, as far as the world records things go, I posted about that recently. And and I got some feedback. I don't have like a huge following or anything, and some people and some important people commented behind the scenes. I think we all agree that that there needs to be some legitimacy added to strongman, especially if we're going to call it a sport, right? Sports have some manner of standardization. That's not saying that we absolutely have to go the route of like powerlifting or Olympic weightlifting and narrow all of our events down so they're perfectly standardized. But as far as world records go, right now, and again, not saying that anything should be wiped clean, or that previous world records or the current world records weren't legitimate. That's not what I'm trying to say. We don't know, right? That's really the conversation is, we don't know what the world records actually were, because they've never been verified, right? Not saying that they aren't what they were quoted. But yeah, I'd love to see as a fan, right? Not just an athlete, like, and they're, you know, and I think as athletes, we are fans too, right? We're not just athletes. We're the primary fans of the sport. And so I try to look, you know, objectively at the sport as a fan too. I hope that doesn't pop up on my screen. I've got messages coming across
Oh,
from my
no.
life. But yeah, we don't have any standardization. So it'd be really great to start seeing, you know, just not just the athletes like kind of demanding it, but promoters kind of stepping up just that little bit and start weighing these implements on camera for everybody to see, so that we know that they are actually what they say they are. Especially when we've got event or world records can be beaten by, you know, 1/10 of a kilogram. You know, it's how do we know that it was actually beaten if it's not weighed, right? We know that there's a lot of discrepancies in non-standardized plates, you know, non-calibrated plates. Every log is a different dimension and different weight, and you know, so on and so forth. So yeah, I mean, I'd love to see that as a big step and advancement in the sport, and you know, legitimizing it as a sport, you know, in my opinion.
Yeah, because I think even seeing it at the local level, you see things kind of change so fast on the fly, or weights. A lot of times, I can't count how many times I've seen them say that the axle bar weighs 35 pounds, and you know it's a Titan one that's probably 28 to 33 pounds. Like that's a difference. Like that can make a huge difference when you're going for a record on something.
Yeah, absolutely. And as athletes, we see that, right? And that's kind of where, you know, my thought process is derived from. Because I mean, you know, maybe it doesn't matter so much in competition itself, you know, as long as everybody's doing the same exact weight on the same implements, right? And we know they all weigh the same. Does it really matter if it's a few pounds off? No, because everybody's doing the same exact weight. When it comes to world records, the difference, again, like I said, you know, an Ironman axle is 33 pounds, pretty standard. I think they're pretty consistently 33 pounds, but it's not uncommon for people to call them 35. Why? Because it's easier math, right? And that's what it is at the end of the day. And I get it, but you know, we're talking about a world record. World records are actually becoming pretty significant today. I mean, you know, for the under 105K class that I compete in, axle and log are both well over 400 pounds now, right? I mean, Emmanuel Pescari just hit 190 log, 190 kilogram log, which is, you know, about, I think that's 418 pounds. So, you know, we're not talking about small weight anymore. We're talking about legitimate weight. People are starting to win legitimate money for these. You know, I mean, it's starting to make a wave in the sport. So I think it's time that we start taking just a little bit extra time and weighing those on camera, not just for the athletes behind the scenes, right? For the fans, because it's the fans ultimately, you know, that are going to grow the sport, in my opinion. You know, you mentioned growing the sport before. Well, what does that mean it means something different to everybody, right? To some promoters, growing the sport means more people, more athletes, because that's a primary source of income, right? That's a growth factor, right? But if we want external money in the sport, we have to grow the audience. And to grow the audience, I think there's got to be some manner of standardization, so that they, you know, it's not only is it believable, but it's trackable, right?
Yeah, I think that's huge, especially
and comprehensive.
Yeah, because I know at least for that level, especially once like the weights are so high, because we really are pushing like the limits of what's humanly possible at this point, that it does make this difference. Because it is hard of like, you can't really wipe away records, but it's hard to compare things so often. Of like, people will talk all they want about the IPF and their new bench arch rule and everything, but the IPF has like, I think they do like 2-hour weigh-ins. Like they have all these things to try to make it as standardized as possible. And I think that can make a difference of like, you have different promoters. Well, people usually try to aim for that 24-hour weigh-in, but then there's all different kinds of gear that can be used. And you look of like, I mean, it makes a huge difference when you're doing an axle clean and press, like if your comp allows grip shirts or not, or what kind of grip shirts they allow.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, the difference between cleaning a log with and without a grip shirt is, I mean, in my opinion, night and day. I don't like grip shirts. I wish they would go away. I think it's, you know, we Strongman I don't know. I always say strongman's for cheating, so maybe I'm being a hypocrite by saying I wish they would go away. I guess I don't care if they're there one way or the other, but yeah, there's got to be some manner of consistency on world records, you know. But who do we go to ensure that happens? You know, that's kind of the big question. There's no overarching committee that decides the rules of strongman. So you've got, you know, and we're becoming more and more splintered and becoming more and more like powerlifting every day, with more and more organizations popping up with their own standards or their own rules or concepts of how things should be done. And that's where I believe, you know, it's got to be the athletes, right? The athletes have got to really be the one that demand the bar to be raised. You know, I mean, sometimes there's this thought, you know, I think it's a little culty sometimes in strongman that, you know, you're not allowed to complain because you're lucky you get anything at all, right?
Yeah.
well, you know, but at the end of the day, also, you know, athletes, in the vast majority of athletes, are paying to compete, right? We're paying for our travel, for our lodging, you know, equipment purchases. We're pumping a lot of money into the sport in one way or the other. I mean, lodging and travel doesn't go directly to sport, but your equipment purchases, supplements, right? Sanctioning fees, membership fees, whatever the case, whatever those are, right? That's a direct injection of money into the sport itself. And I know myself over 14 years, I mean, I don't know what the exact number is, but I've estimated, yeah, I've put $150,000 at least into strongman, right? Which is, you know, and I've probably made maybe $3,000 in that time period. So, you know, I kind of feel like I have a right to have a little bit of an expectation, right? If I'm going to pay to go compete, don't I have a voice in the conversation then that, you know, maybe there should be some minimum standards, like, again, understanding that promoters are volunteering their time and it's not easy, right, to put on a show. I understand that. I understand it very well. But at the same time, if you're going to take that responsibility on, I think you still need to answer to some extent, right, to the athletes if they're willing to say, hey, we need to do better. So yeah, at the end of the day, I think it's really is up to the athletes, and the athlete body is either going to, you know, say yes, we want better, or no, it's okay. You know, none of us have any control over the entirety of the strongman community, but, you know, my hope is that, you know, at some point the athletes are going to start, you know, demanding standards be raised, you know, demand that, you know, things like world records, again, has a minimum standard to be met.
Because I think that makes a big difference. Of like, I think my experience being at like the lower level of it, I was surprised to see how much of that actually flows up. Of like how often, I can't count how many times I've heard like, it's strongman, events change, like weights change, like it's just kind of like on the fly, and that can be a huge difference of in the middle of a competition of like, if the height of the bag over bar is changed or gets stuck at a certain point, or someone forgets a certain weight of sandbags, these things. And I think trying to establish kind of like a larger consensus and everything, but also that planning of, because I think so many people I know who promote local shows are trying to move their way up and everything, because that's the way you grow. And I think trying to set expectations across the board, but it's hard, like you said, because there is that difference of like, it was interesting seeing, what was it, the Shaw Classic, the first year, when he said you couldn't use figure eights for the Hummer tire deadlift. That was like a move of some people are saying, because you realize watching some of these guys in figure eights, it's just your fingertips on the bar. That's a different lift than like,
yeah,
around.
Yeah, no, I agree. You know, again, so, there are a lot of areas that, you know, of discrepancy in strongman. I don't know which ones are more important. You know, because again, strongman is kind of for cheating.
Yeah.
We've been getting away with just about anything for years, right? I mean, we put on double belts. Some people are wearing double elbow sleeves, right? Neoprene head to toe, grip shorts, grip shirts, tacky, right? On the various events, whatever. But it's not okay to pull sumo, for instance. Like, oh, that's suddenly cheating, right? And I mean, I get it in certain regards. Shorter people pulling sumo on 18-inch deadlift aren't even going to break it off the ground. But
Yeah.
Yeah, some of those standards, from one promoter to the next, or preferences, I guess, is really what they are. Those don't bother me so much.
Okay.
Again, as world records being sort of that baseline that, well, records in general, right, are the baseline that all sports measure progress over time, right? I mean, every sport has records that they look back and you can say, 30 years ago, the sport, was only achieving, this, whatever it is, right? Today, the achievements are, far greater. So it is sort of a baseline. It's, I think records are very important to be kept, but they need to have those, in the very, very least, in my opinion, need to have some kind of standardization and consistency. Otherwise, like you just said, I mean, you kind of alluded to it in competition. Well, it's not the same lift, right? If one guy's pulling figure eights with his fingertips, well, it's not the same lift, and it's kind of the same thing with one log to the next can be different, right? I mean, a 10-inch log versus a 13-inch log is relatively, the difficulty level is different, right? The difference between loading a 20-inch stone to a 22 is significantly different. So where's that middle ground that everyone can agree on, that these are some minimum standards that we have to meet, right? And nothing is standardized. So in order for everyone to know and believe that the weight was what it said, rather than just taking somebody's word for it, because again, I'm not saying any promoters are doing this on world records, but we've seen it so many times in every other aspect of the sport, calling an implement an even number because it's easy, right? How do we know that's not happening with world records? And so I think, to be fair to other record holders, right? If you're going to go and try to beat their record, I think it's unfair to them to potentially have lifted something less, right? Because it's not verified. Nobody's weighed it. Or at least it's not weighed for the whole world to see, right?
Yeah.
How do we know that it's, not slightly less than what you say it is? Or vice versa, right? What happens if that guy that just set a world record lifted 10 pounds more than what it was quoted as, right? That just robbed him out of, somebody else is going to come in and beat it by another pound, right? When possibly, they're still 9 pounds off. So I think it adds, I mean, there's a good logical reason to start weighing all of these world records and maintain some consistent standards and ultimately add additional legitimacy to the sport.
Yeah, I personally was surprised to see how many events I've seen of like state and national records, and even now world records, seeing not using calibrated plates. Like, at least in my experience, like rogue plates can be different. Of course, the more expensive your plates are, like the variance gets smaller and smaller, but you think some of these plates, if you're looking at 100-pound plates, but you're allowed to have a 2 to 3% variance, like that adds up of these things. Because the one that's always fascinating to me is like watching the log lifts and everything, where sometimes I'm like, those aren't calibrated plates. Like, we know they're nice rogue plates or whatever, but they don't have that look or that standardization of, like, that's the interesting thing with powerlifting, is pretty much using all the same kind of calibrated plates. Like, you all know what the like 25 kilo plates look like. Their variance is minuscule. And I know from my experience, you also can be really humbled by lifting on calibrated plates, because I know there was a big deal when, well, I know he's just an online entertainer, but he does some like strongman stuff, but Juji Mufu, who got me into strength sports and stuff, like he was talking about how he had almost a 700-pound deadlift in him, and he was so excited about it. Went to comp, and then on calibrated plates, I think struggled with like 660. And you're like, it's a completely different lift if you're not used to that, because there are those variances.
Yeah, I think with calibrated plates, a lot of times in the collars they utilize, but
Yeah.
tightens everything up much more than you're used to in the
Yeah.
gym, right? Slot pulling with plates that are tightly secured to the bar versus, just barely hanging on there with a little spring clip is different. No
Yeah.
doubt about it. No doubt about it. But I don't know if, baby steps, right? Baby steps. I don't think we need to get into
Yeah.
the minutia of subtleties like that just yet. Yeah, someday it would be really great. I mean, on deadlifts, I think, if you're going to do a standard deadlift for a world record, it better be with calibrated plates, right?
Yeah.
No question about it. And it better be, a Texas power bar, Oki power bar, something that we know is standardized 20 kilograms or, 45 pounds, whatever. So there's no question about it. But again, I mean, even Hathor went and weighed all of his calibrated plates, his clips, right? Well, his team did, the helpers did. That was probably the most legitimate world record, in my opinion, ever set, even though it's so controversial because he was done it when nobody could compete in his own gym. So be it. But the legitimacy of what he lifted, you can't question. I mean, I don't
And
know how you could. I mean,
I think that brought so many eyes to the sport too, because I know so many people were impressed by that. Because I think it's one of the first times in a while that so many friends I have who are more passive fans and everything, being able to actually see it weighed out and know this is objectively 501 kg.
absolutely. That's what really kind of started opening my eyes to it. I mean, it all goes back to that lift, right? That was, I think World's Ultimate Strongman continued that trend too with every record breaker that they did that was remote, weighing everything on camera. I mean, I don't know if that was Hathor's idea, if it was Mark Boyd's idea, right, or somebody at World's Ultimate Strongman, which I guess he's not really associated with anymore. But yeah, I mean, that kind of started like opened my eyes. I'm like, why isn't anybody else doing this? And you look back for years in World's Strongest Man, and maybe it didn't matter back then when World's Strongest Man was the only strongman organization there was, right? That it was their world records and they could be whatever they want to be. But now today, and a lot of those organizations still don't recognize each other's world records, which I think is, again, it is left up to us as the athletes, of the fans, to decide what is the actual world record, right? We have that ability. We have that power to say, we don't care that you say it's 500 kilograms. We know for a fact that 501 was pulled, right? Whether or not it was more, significantly different or not, it was more weight, period, end of story, right? And also as fans and as athletes, we have the power to say, hey, in the future, moving forward, you didn't weigh your world record on camera for us to see, to verify. We're no longer going to accept that, right?
Like, even if it's just something of like people offering it as a behind the scenes, but having it on video somewhere where it's verified, like, I think it's important, because I think it's interesting you bring up Hathor thing, because that was so controversial, because some people, they were like, it's a comfort of his own gym that's so much better. But I know, at least for me, that setting can make a huge difference. Of like, I can imagine that for many people, pulling in front of a stadium of people going wild is a completely different, like, emotionally charged event than pulling in your gym with the people you routinely see.
Absolutely. I've never performed better in the gym as I have in competition. I always
Yeah.
perform better when I'm away from home, and I mean, that's neither here nor there. I mean, I don't know how Hathor, how that affected him that day or not. I don't care. Like, the guy pulled 501 pounds. It was done with Ver Magnuson there. He was the official judge. Everything was weighed. He was given a time limit on rests in between sets. I mean, it was very strictly organized and executed. Just because somebody else wasn't pulling in between his attempts, that to me, that doesn't change the dynamic that much,
And
right? His rest, he still had to pull, I think it was every 15 minutes, right?
yeah,
Which I'm okay with it. I'm not going to argue it. The dude pulled a 501 kilograms, and he did it with what looked like relative ease, right? He didn't
which he's
almost
done for
die
505.
afterwards.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I will consider that until that's broken. Even by a half a kilogram, that's the world record. I mean, that it is what it is. It was done under unique circumstances. The world was in a unique place. People came together and solved a problem and still made something happen. And to me, that's kind of incredible in itself. So
I think so. And I think that that's the difference to me is like, I think that's why I was so impressed by it, to be able to pull without that stadium full of people and everything. Cause you saw the
yeah,
difference it made of like the Shaw Classic year 1 versus year 2 of having an audience does change your performance level stuff. And it helps. And I think that having that verification though, I think for other people, it's helpful to like know, because I think especially now that we are pushing the limits, it's not like, I'd say looking back 5, even 10 years ago, people were breaking records by like a substantial amount of kilos and everything. Like if you didn't weigh your plates, but you're still beating it by 20 kilograms, like that's a
I mean,
different thing. But now
if they
we
were calibrated plates,
yeah.
that's fine. See, I feel like if you're going to
Yeah.
use standardized equipment, you don't need to weigh it, right? That's the
Yeah.
point of standardized equipment, is so that it's identifiable, right? We can look on any video using calibrated plates and count the weight because it's color coordinated, right? So we know pretty readily that it weighs what is quoted. Whereas again, use high temp bumpers on a pit bull log, right?
Yeah.
I mean, those things, the variation. I mean, they've always been a nice log, right? Nothing against pit bull by any means, but the variation in the weight of those logs can be 15 pounds, and I've seen it in different logs. I mean, we've got one here that's 83. I know somebody that's got one that's 95, right? So I mean, that's 12 pounds difference, but and then high temp plates. I mean, I've seen those. I've varied, 2 pounds on 45s up and down. The standard metal plates, the ones that say standard on them,
Yeah.
which is kind of a oxymoron because they're those things have a ton of variation. I've got some of those down in my basement that, there's probably a 4 to 5 pound variance between some of them up and down, right? Some of them are less than 45, some of them are over. 100-pound standard plates. I've seen those vary. As a matter of fact, I was just talking with my buddy John Cotton about some of them at one of the gyms here. He weighed one of them and it was 111 pounds. Right? I weighed one of them was 109, and when he told me it was 11, I thought I weighed the heaviest one. One of them was 111 pounds. So you go throw those into a competition, on an Iron Mine axle, call it 633. It could actually be 663. Right? I mean,
Yeah. Which makes a huge difference. I think just having that. And I think a part of it, especially as the sport expands, like there is the money to get the calibrated plates and everything to add that legitimacy and everything.
yeah. I mean, calibrated plates have become very expensive, and again,
Or at least weighing it out then.
at the upper levels, yeah. So maybe there is a difference when we talk about doing actual world records versus state records. State records I'm not too concerned about. Yeah, it'd be nice if they were, weighed and verified and everything too. But, those are kind of nice to have, but they're not as contended, rather contested as world records are. And yeah, I kind of feel that if you're going to hold a competition where there's a world record, you need to be a little bit more prepared, probably, or don't do it.
Yeah.
And if that means, acquiring calibrated plates to do, something like a deadlift. And again, I'm not opposed to using standard plates on a standard bumper plates, generic bumper plates or anything on any implement. if you weigh it on camera, right? And prove that the scale is calibrated, right? I mean, scales can be
Yeah.
far off too. And maybe that's where, hey, you better bring a calibrated plate to put on the scale to show any discrepancies before you weigh the implement. But it doesn't matter. Weight is weight at the end of the day. All that
Yeah.
matters is it weighs what you say it does.
I
And,
so
and yeah, maybe I am saying that if you can't do that, maybe you shouldn't. Again, my opinion, shitty as it is, maybe you shouldn't be maybe you shouldn't be holding a world record breaker if you can't verify the weight.
So, what would your opinion be? Because I've been fascinated hearing about this recently. I remember this came up during one of the, I think, feats of strength or one of the record breakers thing, about atlas stones of like now that sometimes people put like the lead or like make them heavier. What do you think about, because that can really change the lift of some of these stones that like were set with a 24-inch or 22-inch stone that then they make it heavier and it's a 20-inch stone, which is actually a different lift and everything. What do you feel about things like that? Is it weight or?
So no, again, diameter changes the dynamic. And I'm a firm believer that on atlas stones for men, at least, I don't have a lot of opinions on women's records because I don't feel like that's my place to really speak. But on men's world records, I definitely think that they should be done on a 21-inch stone over 48 inches standard.
Yeah.
Right. So I don't know what that is in centimeters on the stone, but I believe that's 122 height, 122 centimeters for the height. But that should be very standard. You're right, because doing a 20-inch stone versus a 22 is a whole different lift. But we got to set some standards, because if we don't, then somebody's going to come and lift a 500-pound 22-inch stone and say, well, since it's technically harder, shouldn't that be the world record? And so does everybody now have to do it on a 21-inch 22-inch stone? Let's just have some standards, something to agree on that everybody can agree on. And I personally, my opinion, and I know others are the same, is 21-inch stone over 48 inches for world records. For max, right? I honestly don't care how many reps somebody can do. Let's just stick to the max.
That makes sense. Because I think having those small things, because like you said, that can really change the dynamic. So I think just trying to have like those standardizations and everything, because also I think the thing that made Halfdoor's lift so legitimate is the fact that everything was standardized and weighed out, so you knew and everything. And I think that helps people have confidence in the sport and everything, because I think it adds unnecessary controversy to not weigh these things out or to not use standardizations, because then you do have this very different thing of like, you have some people setting records in grip shirts, some people without. And like you said, that's a completely different experience, and the law.
I know that, I don't hear a lot of complaining, mind you, not on the men's side. And I'm not saying that the women complain either, but I know that there was some complaints not long ago amongst some female athletes that weren't allowed to wear a grip shirt after someone else was that set a world record. And I know that, caused a little bit of a little animosity, I think. And so, yeah, I mean, again, having some minimum standard for, personal protective equipment, personal gear, whatever it is necessary. And, in my opinion, world records should never be done in grip shirts. Grip shirts, I mean, strongman's for cheating. Strongman is for cheating. But, if we don't set a standard, somebody's going to do it in a grip shirt, and then everybody afterwards is going to say, well, now we get to do grip shirts. And then, where's it in? I don't know. I mean, it's kind of a slow progression anyway, but, we got to have a standard. My opinion is it's no grip shirts, right? Pretty standard equipment. knee sleeves, elbow sleeves, soft belt, hard belt have been around forever. I don't see any reason you can't use that. Wrist wraps, right? No tacky, chalk only, including spray tack. That would be my preference. Because again, I mean, my weight class, Camby did the axle clean and press at the first 2021 Clash. He did it on a non-rotating axle too, right?
Yeah, the welded on. Yeah.
He did. There's no belt clean, like, which I'm all for. And the axle world record, there shouldn't be no belt clean. But does it have to be on a non-rotating axle moving forward? I mean, it's significantly harder, right? I mean, is that where is that what it needs to be moving forward? Probably. But we need to set that standard so that it doesn't change again, right?
Yeah.
Because not everybody has access to a non-rotating axle. You can make one, of course, but
it's a very different thing.
That was an insanely impressive lift if you haven't seen it.
It was 417 or something, or what was it? Because it was.
Yeah, and it was stupid, and he made it look just stupid easy. on day of competition, no doubt, right?
Yeah.
Which is another topic of conversation. I did post myself and Luke Davies talk a little bit about this stuff, and I agree with him that world records should be no more than a 24-hour weigh-in. But if it's done in competition, like on day 3, I mean,
yeah,
fine. Dude competed for 2 hard days previously and still hit a world record on day 3 of a heavier portion of the competition. It's about as legit as it gets, right?
Yeah, no, that was because so many of the ones you see the axle, it's like now they have the Rogue, the 70-pound wagon wheel bumpers almost, and it's like the plates can't rotate. Where's that
right.
welded on? Like that was just an astounding feat of strength and everything.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Zach McCarley came and attempted it this year. And I think he commented afterwards that he's like, that is way harder. Way harder to clean a non-rotating axle.
And I think, it makes a huge difference. And seeing without, did Iron BB when he did 477, that was no grip shirt, right? Because I remember he struggled to clean it like 4 times doing it. I think it was Giants Live a few years ago, or maybe it was last year. Iron BB, he's from one of the competitors from Africa.
Oh yeah, I know what Iron BB is. Okay, yeah, they don't allow. I don't believe they allow grip shirts, but I'm not 100% positive.
So Giants Live, that's not part of, like, they're not their own federation, or how those larger federations work? Because Clash is part of Strongman Corps, right? Or is it?
No, Giants Live, I believe, is its own organ. It's a feeder organization for World's Strongest Man.
Okay,
is what it is. Yeah, that makes sense. I do believe that it's a separate entity from World's Strongest Man.
Yeah,
but it is kind of a direct feeder into that final. Yeah,
that makes sense, because I think it's one of the qualifiers you can do, because it's like Arnold's and that one, and then World's Ultimate Strongman. I think that's one of those qualifiers. Yeah, so I've kind of lost track of like all the paths to World's Strongest Man now. It used to be kind of invite only, more or less. Then they created Giants Live, which was top 3. I think at each Giants Live gets an invite. I think the top 10 still get an invite the following year, the previous top 10. But World's Ultimate Strongman, I don't think anything has nothing to do with World's Strongest Man, vice versa. There were some invites out of SCL this last year, but I think there was no agreement. It might have been coincidental. Yeah. Because that whole relationship actually split apart from World's Strongest Man and IFSA back in like the very, very early 2000s. The guys that run SCL, I believe they were part of the production crew, and IFSA, I don't know if they split first and went and started SCL, or if IFSA did, because IFSA split away from World's Strongest Man, right, and went and started doing their own thing, World Final. And then I think the guys at SCL split somewhere in that
similar time frame, because I think that SEL started in 2003 or something like that. So yeah, I don't know if there's bad blood in there. I don't know what the story is, but I don't think there's ever been or probably ever will be any real real association between SEL and WSM. I mean, it may change, but I don't know. But yeah, I think World's Strongest Man for the most part is invite only and qualifying through Giant Slab. I could be wrong about that. Arnold may get you an invite indirectly because you did well or won at Arnold. I don't know, but Arnold now has its own qualifier process too, right? All the satellite foreign or overseas Arnolds now funnel up to the main Arnold here in Columbus. So
is that, I remember those it's funny when you mentioned the double sleeves. I remember, I think Alexei Novikov at the Arnold's Barcelona did double sleeves, and double neoprene sleeves when they're like 9mm or 7mm sleeves. Like it's quite a bit.
I don't know how he does it. Like I've tried to put like my Mark Bell little forearm cuff and slide up on my elbow and pull my neoprene over, and I can't clean a log. I just like, I suddenly I lose the mobility. It cuts the circulation off. I don't know how he does that. But Novikov is like the king of cheat, man.
He's the technician. Watching him do the Hummer deadlift with his feet.
I'm not saying that negatively. I'm saying that like strongman's for cheating. That dude leverages it in the smartest ways of anybody I've seen in a long time.
Yeah, because he's super well educated and like, but he is the ultimate technician of, you think of, it's interesting to see the transformation go from these static huge monsters to like someone like him who's doing it, who's sometimes weighing in under 300 pounds, which is really wild to think. I think one time he weighed in at like 290 something, maybe it was, I forget. But yeah, no, because I think him and Rob Kearney are the only people who ever weighed in like less than 300 pounds.
No. Guy's name's escaping me now. They're not the only ones. There was a guy that made finals back in, I don't know, 2011, 12 from Wisconsin. What is his name? It's going to come to me later. He weighed in about 165 or 265 rather. That's going to bug me because I've actually met him in person and I can't even spit out his name now.
I guess Maxime Boudreau's is not very big either.
Yeah, there's been a few over the years. Certainly in the early years, but in probably the last 20 years or so, there's been a few under 300. But yeah, there was a big trend, right? I mean, with the big giants like Shaw and Hathor and Big Z that really trended. Bigger was better, right?
Yeah. Well, I think that makes a big difference, but I think that, like we were saying though, that standardization of like any way that we can grow the sport, but also maintain that legitimacy, especially as things get heavier. And everything.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because especially when you said, if it comes down to like it's a handful of pounds, like that can be the discrepancy of just one plate.
Yeah. It could be anything, right?
Yeah.
It could be the implement, it could be the clips, it could be anything on that implement throw, that doesn't add up to what's quoted. And again, that's just world records. Had some people, comment that, they'd like to see it across the board at all competitions. And yeah, I mean, I would too, right? It would be really nice if we could get to that point where all weights are verified. But again, being considerate of promoters and understanding that they are volunteering their time on limited resources, limited time. There's got to be a balance of I think understanding and expectation, right? Where does it really matter at the end of the day? In regular competition, if everything weighs exactly what it says, no. As long as every athlete in that class is using the same weight, right? Doesn't really matter. But would it be nice if we could get to that point? Yeah, because then again, you're able to start building legitimate stats on athletes, comparing, like the Clash series is a good example. All of the events are the same. They're supposed to be the same, right? Same weights across all the events. But we know there's going to be a little bit of variation, and we've got to be a little accepting that as athletes, because again, well, they're able to pay out more money, period, more than anybody else has in the past. Like that's not because they're putting a lot in their pocket. It's because they're foregoing a lot in their pocket, right? So they're making a sacrifice for the athletes themselves. And so there still has to be that understanding that, maybe there's going to be a little bit of variation, and that's okay, because in that relative competition, all the athletes competed on the same equipment, right? But again, it would be really great. I mean, I hope someday to see the sport get to a point where there is, a manner of standardization, at least in the weights of the implements, right? Relatively the same implements across all those competitions, because then we can really truly compare athletes' performances in one competition to the other, right? Mm-hmm. Right now, we can't always, because we don't know for sure that the weights are exactly the same. Again, at Clash on the Rockies, and I know someone's going to roll their eyes at me because I want to wrap this up. but our axle deadlift was quoted at 625. And our plates were 100-pound standard plates, right? And I know those plates. I know where they came from. I weighed them before, right? They probably weighed closer to 640 or 650. Fine, whatever. We all did the same exact bar, right? Didn't matter in that competition. But whereas some of the other competitions used those really nice road competition, well, they look like the road competition plates, which probably weighed probably closer to what they said, right?
Yeah.
And some guys had some great performance. And I'm not taking anything away from those guys. Fucking fantastic performances, right? But can we really truly compare? Did they do better than the guys at that Clash? Probably didn't weigh the same, right? So yeah, I mean, it would be great to get to that point.
And I think too, it would be, as someone who has been much more on like the volunteer side of things, I think it also helps head off some criticism that you face otherwise and everything. Because I know for a fact of when people see things like that, or a lot of the complaints, then it is like blaming the staff and everything, whereas it would be a simple thing to do of being able to say, here, we weighed it out, here's this video of it, we know what we're doing and everything. I think just to like establish that trust and everything, because I think otherwise people do have those like concerns of you have people worrying like, oh, this wasn't really what he said it was. Whereas like it makes it easier on the staff, then there's less things you can complain about, because it's like, here's what it was.
Well, I mean, there's also, there's no reason to be an asshole, right, to the staff or the promoter, right?
People love to be that.
Yeah, don't be that guy. Don't be that guy that goes and complains endlessly and is a dick. Again, right, have a little bit of understanding and empathy, but you're right though at the same time, because we don't, if you're promoting a show, I imagine you want everybody to walk away happy, right? That's kind of should be a primary goal for most promoters anyway. And you don't want anybody walking away feeling like they were cheated by any means. And so, yeah, I mean, if we can get to that point, great, it would be fantastic, right? It would alleviate, I think, a lot of those kind of behind the scenes feelings and whatever that maybe don't always come out, because, right, as a sport for years, I mean, since I've been in it, maybe not early, but for at least a decade or more, right, it's been frowned upon to say anything, right?
Yeah.
We're not allowed to say, and we're not allowed to share our opinions. We're just supposed to say, thank you so much. We're lucky we have anything at all. But there's a fine line here. You don't need to be an asshole about it by any means.
Especially now that competitions are becoming more and more expensive to compete in.
Yeah.
and everything like that
Exactly.
does.
That's your money that you're paying, right? That's kind of
Yeah,
the other side of the argument where, to me, it's kind of bullshit to silence people from having an opinion in this sport, because they're paying, it's their money, right? I mean, and at the end of the day, for the vast majority of athletes in the United States anyway, are customers for the promoters, right? You're not
yeah,
really an athlete at the end of the day. You're a customer, right? And you're paying for entertainment. And if you're paying to be entertained, should you not get value for your money?
yeah,
Absolutely. Absolutely you should, right? And that's where, in my opinion, talking about standards again, there's absolutely zero standards for amateur competition promoters. There's
yeah,
no standards. As long as they pay the sanctioning fees, they can put on as shitty of a competition as they want, right? And people are going to pay for it, and they're, by the kind of the narrative that's been around for many years, they're not allowed to complain, right?
yeah,
Well, that's kind of bullshit too, right? If you want good shows, you have to demand good shows, right? You can't tolerate people putting on, paying $100 for a competition where you don't get the scoring. They can't even bother to reverse score. The equipment falls apart, right? It's in a deteriorating back alley, whatever it is, right? If you're paying good money for it, you damn right, in my opinion, right? Don't be an asshole about it, but you have a right to not be happy with it, right? And say, hey, we deserve better for what we're paying for, right? We're working our asses off. We're paying a lot of money, pumping money into the sport, right? We're supporting vendors, we're supporting promoters and everything else. Can we maybe just have some minimum standards?
yeah. Because I was looking,
I don't think that that's wrong.
yeah, two shows I was looking at for next year. One's $107 and one's $150, and there's nothing else that I would spend that money on and then be told I can't have an opinion about that. And that
Yeah.
makes a difference of like, especially to because you want people to be coming back and everything, because it's one of these things that, I mean, you can gripe about it, people can gripe about it, but part of what's created Amazon's success is like you listen to your customers and like try to consistently improve. And it's that idea of like, some people are saying, hey, we need to charge $150 for a show because we don't have enough people signed up. And I'm like, that should be kind of a warning right there of like,
Right.
ideally, you want people to be excited to be there and to participate, because you do see these things where I've seen things happen. Like one time there's two different yokes and they were like, oh, these are 185-pound yokes. Turns out one's 165 and one's 205. That's a very different, that 40-pound gap is like
Yeah.
huge. And I think these things I think advice for like promoters and people who, like I've been involved in trying to help out, is realizing that you could actually do that as like a promotional video for the event, is actually showing, hey, we're weighing out the implements, kind of give a rules meeting type video. But like, I think most people would be kind of excited to see something like that. Be like, here are the rules for the wagon wheel deadlift. We've weighed everything out. Here's what we're doing and everything. I think transparency never hurts anything. And I think
No.
it helps create legitimacy. And like you said, this sport is no longer a back alley thing. Once you have ESPN and so many eyes on you,
Right.
it
Well,
gets more and more.
Clash is definitely not the back alley. Clash is doing.
Well, no,
Clash
that's what I mean. Is that it used to, like, things used to be years ago, but like Clash has been a game changer.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Anthony Furman and TJ and Tyler. I'm drawing a blank on everybody's names, but those guys are doing a fantastic job.
Yeah,
No
and that's been
question
a game
about it. I mean,
changer.
they've raised the bar on quality of equipment being used. But I mean, they're it's open to a higher elite level athlete, right? That has earned their place at the table. It pays out a lot of money. I mean, the most money I think any weight class athlete had ever earned previously They're trying to produce a high quality product. I mean, there's a lot of motivation there for them to put on quality shows. So I don't think that's ever going to happen from that perspective. But just in general, I mean, the vast majority of competitions in the United States are, going to be amateur competitions, and it doesn't. I don't know how to say this without sounding like a dick. I mean, the amateur shows don't matter much to me anymore, right? Because I'm not going to compete in it, right? I don't mean to sound pretentious, but I mean it's kind of the truth. But at the same time, as someone who rose up through those same ranks and has invested a shitload of money, it kind of pains me sometimes to see that the sport kind of deteriorated from when I started. There was some, at least where I started up in the Minnesota area, promoters put in a lot of effort to make sure that the little things, happened. Again, like true 24-hour weigh-ins. Scoring was completely transparent and shared. Reverse scored every event. They weren't screwing up the the scores at the end, and giving trophies to the wrong people or whatever happens, out in amateur shows these days that I've heard about. But I mean, it is kind of painful sometimes to look and see that the sport has become more at that level, quality or quantity over quality, right?
Yeah.
And and I'd like to see new athletes have a similar experience that I had, early on. But, my experiences though too, I mean, it's part of the reason it pains me is because even when I was still an amateur, things started to change and I started, experiencing worse and worse competitions. I've paid a lot of money for a show that I never saw my scores, right? I've paid a lot of money where, I had to cut and weigh in, at 8 p.m. the night before and somehow managed to replenish. I've paid for those shows and had equipment fall apart and have to finish on something else. I've competed in the deteriorating back alley, so, a lot of that's my own experience too. And, I'd love to see some of that change, but it's not going to change, right? Unless athletes speak up and maybe they don't care, right? I mean, maybe they just don't care and they won't ever speak up, but I wouldn't expect anything to change for the better if they don't, right?
I think there's a hunger for it though. I think like a shout out to Iron Podium, their live scoring thing has been a game changer for local shows and everything. When it's utilized. But that's also the thing, because I have been surprised when people do pay for it and then they don't put all the scores in until the end. And I'm like, it's really great of like, we actually had one event where I was actually doing the scoring and I slightly messed stuff up and the coach came over right after, like on the very first event, like I literally just hit enter. He came over, he was like, oh, this is wrong. We went back, watched the video, and I was like, oh, I was wrong. And we changed it right there. Whereas that's much harder to catch if you're waiting till the very end to like keep these things. And I think simply like having the athletes sign off on what you're inputting is huge as well. But like you said, I think people have to be passionate about what they do. And I think the Clash series has proven that there is passion there. And there obviously is like a desire for like the high quality level of entertainment that the Clash delivers and everything. So hopefully I think that'll trickle down to other places, because I think people do want those.
And it may. I mean, I know that Furman, I think, is promoting America's Strongest Man this weekend in Nashville.
Oh, nice.
I know he's got a big part in it. So, maybe his passion will start helping to change the dynamic within, Strongman Corp and, maybe USS too. I know that there's USS is starting to feed into the Clash series from nationals. So, maybe in time things will change, in some regard, in those regards. But there's a lot to do, right? More power to them for putting forth the money, putting up the money, putting the time in, again, at the end of the day, we've got to be understanding of the promoters, right? By no means am I saying that everything has to change and change overnight, and that, fuck everybody that doesn't do it the way I say it, because that's not what I'm saying at all. I'm just saying that, there is probably a point though that maybe some people shouldn't be putting on competitions if they can't meet some minimum standards. And I don't think that that's wrong at all, right? I mean, I'd rather see quality over quantity. It'd be much better to have fewer shows, much higher quality shows overall, and have increase the consistency and standards in the sport. I think it will make the sport look, make it more legitimate, right? I think it presents a better image to potential sponsors. And from a fan perspective, I'm a firm believer that that's one of the reasons that, there's a lot of reasons why I don't think we have a big fan base in Strongman, but I'm pretty positive part of it is because it's very difficult for the average layman to follow. First of all, with the non-standardization, it's very difficult to follow big competitions that have 20 weight classes and 500 people attending. Total chaos out on the field. But that's where Clash is doing better, right? Doing a lot. It's a much smaller fields of single class athletes. I think that's much more digestible from an audience perspective. So they're definitely moving in the right direction from that regard.
Yeah. And I think, like you said, that single class thing, because there are people of like, what is it? The Rogue Invitational, 1.8 million views on the condensed version, 1.1 million for the live stream. Like there are eyes for it if it's easy to follow and well done.
Yeah, it's crazy that they still got that kind of viewership, because I personally couldn't watch it. I couldn't watch the live. I was only there to watch the Strongman though. One event every 8 hours was like mind-numbing.
I have YouTube Premium that I just kept in the background and would just come out occasionally to like see. But it was I think those condensed things, and ideally, I think Clash also live streaming things will change things, because I think people are kind of tired of having events that you only know what happened via an Excel spreadsheet that's going around the internet. You see the cell phone footage and stuff.
I think they're tired of watching for 8 hours or 10 hours too, right? I think World Ultimate Strongman was the first to do a live, maybe one of the first. They're certainly one of the first big shows. And while it was, the quality of the equipment was fantastic, and the athletes were, top level guys, it was like 10 hours long, right? I'm like, ain't nobody got time for that, right? Where Clash is blasting through these shows now in like 2.5 hours, right? It's tough on the athletes, but that's a sacrifice worth making, in my opinion, to get through a show fast, make it more entertaining, make it more digestible and consumable. That's huge.
I definitely prefer those quicker shows, because seeing what the one event where they had the max squat that like took forever, like a 2.5 hour event and everything, like those things can be time consuming and everything.
Right. Yeah, that's part of like Strongman has always been, this is where I kind of struggle. People are going to hate me for saying this, but I've always struggled calling Strongman a sport for a lot of reasons. It's definitely more of a spectacle, right? It's always been sort of a spectacle. That's where it started out. That's why, everything is big and bulky and crazy shape and huge, right? And that's why they do those kind of events, right? It's because there's still part of that spirit of Strongman that survives. This is a spectacle, right? But a spectacle is not a sport, right? It's a spectacle. It's an exhibition of sorts, right? If you want to make it a sport, that kind of, to me, unfortunately, some of those big, bulky, slow moving events have to go, or you have to have more equipment, one or the other, right? If you want to still have those big events, to make it entertaining for an audience, if that's your goal, is to grow the audience rather than grow the the athlete body. You either have to eliminate those slow moving events, or you have to add equipment, right? So you're running multiple lanes so you can blast through it faster.
Yeah.
Just to me, that's a sacrifice you have to make if you want to be a sport and be entertaining. You got to have some standardization, and you've got to move fast.
Yeah. And I think things are trending that way. The nice thing is there's plenty of stuff going on that we can have strong opinions about going forward and everything.
Absolutely, man. Yeah, we could talk about this all day.
Yeah. But the nice thing is I think I think this was good and everything for a first time. Do you have any last words?
Episode. What's that?
You have any last words for the inaugural episode?
No, I mean, we'll see what kind of shitstorm ensues. Hopefully, it doesn't turn into too much drama, and the mob comes after us with pitchforks and torches. At least not yet. This was probably fairly mild episode, and we'll see what the future holds.
Yeah.
We'll see if by the end of the year we still have our heads.
Oh, I think it'll be good. And hopefully, I think the next one will be even better as we're here
Yes, sir.
and everything.